Kings understand how simple yet intentional efforts can positively affect their lives. For example, standing up straighter. Seems easy, seems pointless, but dive a bit deeper and the effects are profound. My name is Logan, and on this channel I help you understand that you are in fact a king. And as such, it is time to think like a king, and in so doing, you will live like a king. Now today we are discussing rule number 1 of Jordan Peterson's book, The 12 Rules for Life, an Antidote to Chaos. And this rule simply states, stand up straight with your shoulders back. Now, the essence of this rule really discusses the interaction between the physical and the metaphysical, and how we can influence this interaction to create a positive feedback loop, to progress in the world, make sense of the world, obtain the desires of our heart, help others, so be a rock and a support mechanism for loved ones, influence the world in the way that we would like, and ultimately have meaning. So that is the essence of the rule, but let's discuss how we actually get to that point. So let's open with a discussion on the dominance hierarchy. Now, the dominance hierarchy essentially tells us our position in society amongst our peers. It tells us what we can obtain, what we can achieve. So what type of mates to which we have access, where we can live, where we can travel, what resources we can gain, and how easy it is for us to do so. So around here, we would call this a top whatever percent male, right? So a top 1% man would live in the top rungs of the dominance hierarchy and have the utmost access to all of these, while a bottom 1% man would lack choices and thus have just the opposite. So the dominance hierarchy essentially leads to the options you do or don't have depending where on the scale you fall. So this is the first point we really must understand. The dominance hierarchy exists and we are affected by it, whether we want to be or not. And a point that stems from this is that you are going to be affected internally by where you stand on the dominance hierarchy as well. So your external standing will influence your internal beliefs. Now, just as importantly, you can influence your external standing by your internal beliefs as well, but more on that later. So for now, we at least have a basic understanding of the dominance hierarchy and what it means for us. So next, you need to understand why it is important for you to become dangerous, why you need to be a monster. And that's both in your perception and your true ability. And what that means for you is that you progress as high as you possibly can on the dominance hierarchy, and you vigorously and ferociously pursue that end. And you understand that being a monster is the ultimate form of self-mastery, and is also a lifelong journey, but it does come with some milestones. See, being a monster is all relative, and it's likely that you're already perceived this way by some, but the lifelong aspect involves striving to be perceived this way by all. So you're forever pursuing a goal of everyone seeing you as a monster. But does that mean you act monstrously? Well, no. In fact, it often allows you to do the opposite. See, you have such a high ability to act monstrously that you often never have to do so. Bad characters will be way too afraid to challenge you or your assertions. They'll simply understand that to do so would be way too dangerous. And thus lies the importance of becoming a monster. Because as Peterson says, those who have swords and know how to use them, yet they choose to keep them sheathed, will inherit the world. See, to understand the importance of becoming a monster yourself, you need to understand that others are striving for this goal and they might act monstrously. So don't be naive in your beliefs here. If you just believe that people are inherently good and they won't do you any harm, you're actually making yourself extremely susceptible to be harmed. And when Peterson is expounding on this point, he's not saying to approach every day and everyone through a cynical lens, but one of realism. Don't underestimate the capability of people to do evil. And know that if you do desire to do good in this world, that it will likely come at the expense of oppressors. And oppressors won't like that at all. So they will seek to snuff out your voice and oppress you further. But if you are a monster, you can stop the oppression early, and often simply by using your voice and demeanor. See, if you tell the oppressor to stop what they're doing, and they feel that you mean it, and they also feel that if they keep on doing this, you're going to do something about it, and they perceive you as a monster, then you have now positioned yourself in the best possible place to actually make them stop and thus do good. So seek to position yourself this way, having the ability to stop oppressors by sitting atop the dominance hierarchy and becoming a monster. This is what I'm striving to do daily, so let's strive for this goal together. Now, a quick aside here that becoming a monster does come with a huge amount of responsibility as well. So make sure you're also putting efforts into controlling the power that you gain and learn to sheath your sword. Okay, so now we know that we must become monsters ourselves in order to do the most good. So the only question remains, how do we become monsters? Well, the answer to that lies within positive feedback loops. So these are loops where one action causes a reaction, and then this reaction feeds back into the action that caused it. And in this way, it amplifies the original action. So now you can probably see what will happen from here. The original action, now amplified, will cause an even greater reaction than it did before. This greater reaction feeds back into the original action, amplifying it even further, so on and so forth. And of important note here, the word positive does not necessarily mean good. It just means that both the action and the reaction work in the same direction and amplify each other. And thus we should understand that a positive feedback loop can both be used catastrophically to bring our demise or incredibly favorably to propel you upwards. This concept is probably best illustrated through example. So to explain the negative side of a positive feedback loop, I'll use one common example. When you have an itch, you scratch it. Have you ever wondered why scratching an itch provides so much relief? Well, it's actually because you're interrupting the feeling of the itch with pain. When you scratch an itch, it sends pain signals to the brain, which in essence distract you from the itching sensation. The problem here is that when your brain receives this pain signal, it releases serotonin. And what does serotonin do in this case? It increases the sensation of the itch. So then what do? You scratch more. And if this gets really bad, like in the case of eczema or chronic itching, you can end up doing some serious damage to yourself, opening wounds, leading to infections and scarring. Now we can take this concept of the positive feedback loop and apply it to something even more devastating, such as alcoholism. And this is what Peterson chooses to do. He discusses how someone drinks alcohol to feel its effects, and then they drink as much as they can in order to continue to feel the effects. And then they wake up the next day with a bad hangover because of withdrawal symptoms. And then they discover that these symptoms can be cured with more alcohol. And so now the medication is the very thing that causes the disease, and into the vicious cycle they are thrusted. So these examples clearly illustrate how positive feedback loops work and how powerful they can be. So the key here is to use this information positively to become a monster. And so begins the true advice of this rule. Stand up straight with your shoulders back. This initial action sets our positive and advantageous feedback loop into motion. And we can see this by considering the person that does the opposite of this. Imagine what happens to the person who is slumping down with their shoulders forward. This person seems defeated, like they're losing. And no matter if it's true or not, they won't be trusted. Because granting trust has nothing to do with whether you're a good person, and everything to do with whether you can accomplish what you say you're going to accomplish. If someone confides in you, can you help them? Well, certainly not if you're looking at the ground and don't even appear to be able to help yourself, right? And we simply won't allow ourselves to trust a person of this nature. But something similar, though opposite, can be said of someone who stands tall. They will immediately appear like someone who knows what they are doing. Now, is posture alone enough to send you spiraling up the dominance hierarchy? Well, of course not. But this is where the discussion of the interaction between the physical and the metaphysical becomes relevant. See, when you begin to do this simple act of standing up straight in the physical, you begin to feed this narrative to your internal self as well. It helps you believe internally that you are someone who's confident and capable and competent. And so you begin to stand up straighter metaphysically as well. And this is where the true impact begins to amplify, because you're changing your belief systems. And with these newfound beliefs, you're unafraid to take on new challenges, and you succeed in these. So now your physical status rises, and your initial action becomes more amplified and palpable. You're standing even straighter, and your shoulders are even further back than before. Your confidence is rising, and other people can feel it too. They begin to give you their trust and ask for your aid in tough situations. And now you're impacting the world around you, affecting positive change. You're increasingly more fit to seize new opportunities when they arise. You have a good support system, and you've proven you can handle yourself in difficult situations. You're becoming more and more fit and less desperate. And so now you're even able to delay gratification. You're not so bent on fleeting pleasures because you're used to having what you want when you want it. So you can actually push what you want now off and get more, way more of that thing you want in the future. And as you stand up straighter and straighter, both physically and metaphysically, you will fulfill the prophecy that to the one who has much, more will be given. And so now is the time, King, to begin to see the world as challenges you can conquer, not as circumstances that happen to you. To see the success that can be bred from failure. To take on new and exciting opportunities when they arise, no matter how scary they seem at first. Be someone who has a voice with something to say during storms. To ascend the dominus hierarchy and become a rock for others. To be someone who has meaning in life and can change the world. To stand up straight with your shoulders back. Now, Kings, I encourage you to go read this rule in Peterson's book for yourself. I believe it can be truly life-changing if you take what's in its pages to heart. I will be making videos on the rest of the 11 rules as well, so stay tuned for that. But now it's time for me to serve as your reminder. Always put the work in, and from there, leave it in the hands of the one true King. Stay kingly.